movies from various genres and decades. Stay tuned for this episode. All right, we're here. MovieNaut number 9. We're talking about favorite 50s and 60s sci-fi movies. And we have a guest on, Mike Korn. Mike, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, there's not too much to tell about me, but my good friend Dr. Abner Malady is pretty busy. He does the website Wormwood Chronicles, and also writes for Ravenous Monster, Webzine, and Rebel Extravaganza. So he kind of has his finger in a few things. But me, I'm a lifelong fan of monster movies, sci-fi, comic books, wrestling, gangster flicks, heavy metal, you name it.
Yeah, and then of course joining us again is Gary and Bill.
Mike's a man after my own heart.
So we'll start off with you, Mike, your first choice.
Well, this has been this one thing I got in common with Andy Warhol is Creation of the Humanoids is one of our favorite movies. And this was known as Warhol's all-time favorite movie. And I really like it because it's different than any other movie of the era. A lot of the science fiction in the 50s and early 60s is only marginally science fiction. It's usually about like a dinosaur waking up or a giant bug on the rampage or an alien invasion, but you never learn that much about the aliens. But this movie, Creation of the Humanoids, is a real science fiction story. It deals with a lot of questions about artificial intelligence, artificial life, what the destiny of robots and human beings is. And it creates like this entire culture. In other words, it's an example of what they now call world building. There's a lot of different aspects to the story, and I saw it, and it's a dirt cheap movie. It could almost really be a film play, but the dialogue and the discussion is so interesting in it that intellectually you're always kind of caught up in it. And even if you can see, a lot of people might be surprised by the ending. I could kind of see it coming a little bit down the pipe, but it's revealed in such a way that even if you know it's coming, it still works. So I would highly recommend anybody that likes real science fiction movies to see this. In a lot of ways, it's like Blade Runner, like 25 years before Blade Runner, because it's about the blurring lines between robots and humans. And also much better acted than you might think for like a real low budget 50s film. So I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I think it's probably one of the most unique movies of its time period.
That sounds really good.
I've seen it. I will say it's definitely dialogue heavy.
It is. It's not an action movie, but to me, I find the dialogue and the back and forth interesting enough on it where it always keeps me interested in it. And I just like stuff that's like unique, and I can't think of any other movie like this in its time period.
No, that's very true.
All right, Bill, you're up.
I'm up. All right, my first movie is The Blob. I love that movie. One of the first movies with Steve McQueen, early anyway for him. 1958. A meteor crashes to the earth, and a group of teenagers. Steve McQueen plays like a 40-year-old teenager, but anyway. goes and investigates, and so does this guy and living in an old shack out there in the country. Goes and investigates as well, and he finds this blob of goo, whatever, protoplasm or something. He's poking it with a stick, and it attacks his hand. The teenagers find him. They take him to the doctor, and they're fighting the blob there. Eventually, the blob just goes around eating everybody in town. They hide from him in grocery stores. It attacks the theater, and everybody it eats, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And on top of all that, Burt Bacharach does the soundtrack. That opening place, that opening little song there. Beware of the Blob.
It slides up the wall. Beware of the Blob.
It's a great movie. When I first started showing my daughter some old classic horror movies like that, this became one of her favorites. But she used to call it The Blob, which I always found was actually a very appropriate title as well. That could be a movie in and of itself. But it's got a little bit of everything. Some people complain about the police in there. One of them's a little too friendly with the teenagers. But most really good cops probably would do that. Find out what the kids are up to by befriending them, and if they're doing anything illegal, I'm sure they would try to give them guidance and things like that.
And kind of the teenagers cop relationship was sort of redone like that in a bunch of movies, but I just watched again Killer Clowns from Outer Space last weekend, and it's kind of the same relationship.
Yeah, it's done in a number of movies, and I think it's probably accurate. For the time, you'd have your good cops and your bad cops. Some of them kind of get the teenagers, and if you talk with them, you can figure out if they are doing anything that you need to worry about.
Another movie that has the cop teenager relationship a lot like that is the giant Gila monster.
Oh yeah,
it is actually.
I've never seen that one.
That's one of my favorites.
The sheriff gets along with the kids, and knows just how to handle them. And the kids are basically not shown to be hoodlums, which is pretty much the case in the Blob. So I always thought that those movies kind of resembled each other in that respect.
They probably do.
That was a movie that could have almost made my list, except I think I already did it in another one of our things. But I love that movie. I love the remake, and they're doing a new version, which I was happy to hear that they're looking at preserving the whole practical effects thing for the remake. So that bodes well.
I do like the practical effects thing. Yeah, the giant Gila monster is another one of my favorites as well. I wasn't sure it was science fiction enough, so I went more with the Blob. And looking at my list here, we might be revisiting a lot of giant protoplasm attacking people throughout the night here. I didn't quite that theme, but apparently I did. But anyway, that's what I have. That's one of my personal favorites.
Okay, so that brings us to me. Mike, I got one of your giant bug movies.
Okay.
Probably the best of the giant bug movies, I think.
Yeah.
You've got the giant ants. And that movie is just, it still holds up pretty well. And they're remaking that one too, by the way. I hope they're going to practical effects somehow on that one rather than going all CGI. But, the ants look dumb on the one hand, but they also look scary as hell too. It still holds up pretty well all this time later. It was 1954 and it still holds up.
Very realistic.
It's very much the scientist trying to warn everybody and nobody listening.
Yeah,
isn't that the way? Isn't that the way?
Yep.
Actually, so much similar to the Blob. The kids are trying to warn everybody, and nobody wants to listen to that.
Yeah.
Both of them do follow each other.
Speaking of not listening to scientists, or actually, wait, this is more of the scientists kind of not listening to other scientists, cracking the world. I just rewatched it 2 weeks ago just because I kind of want to get back into what these the 5 movies I had, and it kind of has some ties to today's thing, where with tapping into geothermal, and then of course obviously with that name of the movie, that something's going to go wrong. I mean, it always happens. It's like, and just it's amazing just how much, to me personally, it could be a movie that they can make today, and it will have. I mean, actually, they did kind of make something similar on Korn. That's kind of similar to it, but this one, I like it. I like these old 50s and 60s stuff because they're even the ones that are hokey, they still rely more on a dialogue than modern stuff, where they tend to just rely on CGI, for these kind of movies. Yeah.
Well, the crack in the world, that was a lot about the personal relationships of the guy who caused the disaster and then tried to solve it.
And I like the thing right here. Thank God it's only a motion picture.
They should remake it and use fracking for the cause of the crack in the world.
Yeah, that's really one of my more recent favorites in the past 20 years. And when I got that on Blu-ray, because I was watching it a lot on different streaming. I think I even found it on YouTube, which I'm sure probably most of these stuff that we're going to talk about, you'll find usually a really awful copy of it, all grainy and everything. But it's a good way, to help you buy your movies. I mean, good, so you have a nice collection. Bad, your wallet kind of suffers. But this is a good one. If you like, it's like a more science, has more science back to it than anything, but it's a great disaster movie,
One of the things I found unique about that movie is that they didn't find a last minute solution to the problem. I mean, the world is pretty much trashed at the end of this. I mean, people survive, but it looks like, if I'm reading the movie right, the world has 2 moons instead of 1 after the end of this.
And I'm trying to remember also too, the sky looks very different.
Yeah. I would. They didn't explicitly come out and say this was the end of the human race,
right?
But with all the garbage floating in this, if you take the science fact, all the debris floating in the air, there's going to be an ice age that lasts for 10,000 years after this.
Oh yeah, but I like on some of these older movies that they kind of leave it up to the viewer's imagination as to what really happened.
And some people hate that. Some people hate the sort of figure it out yourself. They want it all spelled out. I tend to like it when you can fill in the blanks yourself.
Yeah, especially if it's done right. If it's done right. I mean, I prefer that. I kind of like where it's a mystery. It's like, what really happened, type of thing.
Yeah,
that's my first choice. So
that's a good one.
Back to you, Mike.
Second movie I picked was another big bug movie. And this one was a bit lower budget and kind of flew under the radar compared to them, which the general thinking is them is the cream of the crop of the giant bug movies, which I wouldn't dispute it. And then just a hair below that is Tarantula. Which is another one I really like. I would say probably maybe just a little hair below Tarantula, or even equal as this one, The Monster That Challenged the World. This was written by very good writer named Pat Fiedler, who did a couple other low budget movies I really liked, The Vampire and The Return of Dracula from the 1950s. But this has kind of a unique setting, the Salton Sea in Southern California, which is like a miniature version of Salt Lake with sort of a bizarre environment. And an earthquake, which we were just talking about, unleashes these giant millipedes from the bottom of the lake. And they kind of start going on the rampage. And there's a nearby military base, and they're called in to help with it. They think they have it solved, but just when they think they've got it figured out, they find out they have to start all over again. The thing I liked about this is real good characterizations on the people that seem a lot more like real people. Hans Conried, I don't know if you know who he is as an actor. He played like Wrong Way Feldman on Gilligan's Island, and he done the voices for tons of cartoons. He's the head scientist on this one. And I think he's one of the best 50s scientists they've had because he acts different. When they send people down to investigate the monsters, you know, he's not like the other types of 50s scientists that said, well, we must learn more, you know, we have to stay here till the end. When he says, get out of there now, you know, get out of there quick before it gets you. He seems to be putting the people ahead of the science. He's kind of like the opposite of the guy that was in The Thing, if you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly. I love that movie.
Yeah.
I've seen Monsters That Challenge the World too. That is a good one. Low budget, but I think they do it well. They, you know, they built more in characterization.
I'll tell you what. There was one scene where they had an old guy was watching the locks or the dams that were going into the sea, and he heard racket, and he goes out and he said, "Hey kids, get out of here! You know, it's like almost midnight. You don't need to be around here." He turns around and zoom, one of these monsters comes right in and grabs him by the neck. When I saw that the first time, I jumped out of my chair. You
And
know,
I think, didn't he earlier go out there and it was kids?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it snuck up on him so quiet, you know.
Yep.
I thought that was a great scene for a low budget movie.
And then they had the one they were keeping the egg they had keeping
Yeah.
cold in the lab, only it didn't wind up getting kept cold. Or
well, the bratty little
Yes.
girl. Like I say, the plot is not super original, but it's the characterization and the dialogue that makes it work. Which is, so now it's all special effects. I mean, I love like King Kong and Godzilla, and what I've seen of the most recent movie, it just looks absolutely ridiculous. You know, I mean, it's like you'd expect words to pop up on the screen. Please insert more quarters. You know, to keep the movie going. There is like zero humanity or zero personality in it. They had to do it way back then.
One thing I would say, if you haven't seen Godzilla -1, there's a lot of humanity and everything.
I love that movie. I like that.
That one's really rough. I haven't seen Godzilla X Kong yet. I'm hoping to go tomorrow. I love the older ones best, but you know, if I can see even these newer ones on the screen, I'm gonna go see it. But you know, nothing beats those.
Godzilla -1 is the first Godzilla movie to win an Oscar.
Yeah,
absolutely,
and it deserved it.
Yeah,
it deserved it.
I think it won Best International Picture instead of a Best Special Effects, but I'll take whatever I can get.
Exactly. You're up, Bill.
All right. My second one, I'm back on. I got these out of order, so I don't know if I'm going chronologically like I usually do. But anyway, because of my technical difficulties earlier. But anyway, I'm going to go with the Angry
I
Red
am going
Planet.
chronologically this time, which is unusual for me.
Yeah. I'm going with the Angry Red Planet next, which is not too far removed from the Blob, which was also red. But in this one, they're going into outer space and they find some protoplasm out there that's attacking them, along with a whole bunch of other monsters and everything else coming to get them. And of course, it has one of my favorite monsters, which is not in there for very long, but the rat bat spider. You gotta love that giant rat bat spider. It's on the poster and everything you can see about this movie. What's that?
The Misfits sure liked him. They put him on the cover of their album.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it was a Rob Zombie song as well, Angry Red Planet. I love that song. It's a really fun outer space movie, though. I don't know if you call it a space opera, but it's, they're going into the onto Mars and battling creatures and dealing with all the things going on out there. It's really a fun movie. I like to revisit it every couple of years or so. I think I saw it again last year. Was the last time I saw it. That hasn't been too long, but loads of fun. Outer space, spaceships. They got the helmets and everything. Dealing with the goo that is attacking the ship. You see it bubbling up in the windows and everything, and they're worried about that, trying to get back to Earth. Just have fun with the movie sometimes, I mean, these kinds of adventure kind of things are just, I don't know how much of this was even scripted. Some of it looks like they're killing times every once in a while, but if you're bored on a planet, you'd probably be looking to kill some time. So it becomes believable again.
I thought before they landed on the planet, I thought this was kind of pedestrian. But boy, once they land, man, this show takes off. I mean, there's everything. Everything comes flying at them. And a big shock to me was the comic relief died a gruesome death in this movie, which you didn't often see.
That's right. Yeah, he does.
Yeah. Yeah. And also it kind of scolded the humans at the end of it. It says, don't come back, kids, or
Right. It's a great, fun little 50s horror film whenever you're in the mood for one. That's like one of my go-tos when I'm in that mood. So that's my second one.
Okay, so for my second one, I kind of went with one of the movies that was one of my favorites growing up. I mean, I know you guys remember in those days you'd have to wait until something was on TV to see it.
Exactly.
And whenever it was on, I would try to watch it because I absolutely loved it. And it's one of sort of the more thinking science fiction movies, This Island Earth. And yes, it does have a bug-eyed monster, but they basically put it in there because the studio wanted it. But it is actually, I mean, you've got basically a couple acts of the movie. One is where they're figuring out this mystery of what these people are that want them to invent this thing and have them assemble it. And then they wind up on this space journey. The space journey is a little anticlimactic because once they get there, they basically have to turn around and come back. That's always kind of bothered me about that movie, but it's a really good movie. It's a lot of fun. And that's from 1955. So
I recently got that one about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a good one. I like that one.
That is a fun one. Yeah, I've seen that one a few times.
The mutant is sure a classic monster.
Oh yeah, he's one of the all-time classic monsters, and he was just literally thrown in there because they needed a bug-eyed monster for the studio to support it.
If you gotta throw one in there, make it a good one.
Yep.
Why not?
All right. My next one is The First Men in the Moon. This is a H.G. Wells story, and it's just amazing how they create their little space capsule and catapult it into space. And it's like, I mean, where the story takes place back in the late 1800s, and but the way it starts off is like modern day astronauts go to the moon, and then they see a British flag and a handwritten note like that's going to survive, 60 some odd years for them to read, and then it kind of goes back to the 1800s and takes you, and it's really good science fiction. I up until the point when I got this about 10 years ago, I had never seen it before, and when I got it just because I do believe Ray
Harryhausen did the special.
He did the stop motion stuff. So I was like going, okay, I have the Sinbad movies. I got to get this one too, and I was on a kick of getting all of them. I don't know if I have them all, but it's just really cool. I mean, I really enjoyed Peter. The monsters are pretty cool, and I like how at the end how the older guy, but you notice that the older guy kind of reminds you of what an H.G. Wells would be, just the same as like that movie Time After Time. They always depict as the timid scientist, and then he always wants to stay back to learn more about the planet, the moon. He wants to know more about the moon, and it actually has become one of my favorite ones in recent times.
Yeah, it's a kind of a funny movie because the start is so great with that hook of finding the flag on the moon.
Yeah.
And then they find the guy in the nursing home and says, "I was the man who planted the flag."
Yeah,
and
yeah, that was.
He tells the story, and then it's almost like a lighthearted comedy for like a half hour or so when they're putting the ship together.
Oh
and
yeah.
Finally, but when they land on the moon, then it becomes a real science fiction, and the ending is it's pretty downbeat, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ray Harryhausen, he could do no wrong.
Oh, I know. And if you remember when the ship blasted off, it kind of there was another movie that I think took that idea, flash forwarding. Just the same way. So it's just kind of neat how later movies kind of not really nick, but just almost, I would say it was almost an homage to it. Just saying. But it's a good one. It's one of those. What was the rating on it? Rated G, I think it was. So it's basically the whole family can watch something like this. It's not, the monsters aren't scary per se. Maybe for a younger child it might be, but for the most part.
You know what? That's the one thing I'll bet every movie we all picked has got in common during this time period. I'd be very surprised if they all aren't rated G. And they don't even put out kids' cartoons that are rated G anymore.
Anymore, yeah.
Yeah, it's even a straight PG is hard to find.
Right. So
I think some of the ratings they put on them now are they might be retroactive, because I think the MPAA rating system starts I think it starts the late 60s, like 68 or 69, something like that.
Yeah, you're right. They used to have GP, remember, rated GP?
Yeah, that's right. The general public, it was supposed to be. But they might have started rating them earlier, but they weren't really paying attention because they still had the Hays Code going on. That gets replaced by the MPAA ratings.
Okay. Back to you, Mike.
Well, let's see. Number three. You know, if I was doing this again, I might I might choose different, but I'll go with what I picked, which is a movie called The Atomic Submarine. It came out in the late 50s. And I'm sure all of us here are probably familiar with the TV show Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, you know, which when I was in grade school age, I used to run home to see that all the time. Well, this has to be the inspiration for a lot of it. It's atomic submarine that's sent on a special mission to track this mysterious UFO that is visiting pretty much worldwide, but it goes around sensitive places. And at first, they don't know if it's extraterrestrial or if it's come from a foreign power. As they continue the pursuit, they become certain that this is from outer space. And it's got one really bizarre looking alien that is on the ship. It's kind of it's an adventure movie, really, which adventure movies kind of got replaced by action movies, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There is a difference between them. But there's a part where all the people on the sub, they have their own conflicts with each other, and they have to kind of rise above it if they're going to take care of this, because it's definitely a hostile alien that they're after. And it's not, you know, this is not a world beater movie, but it's just, I always like sub movies, you know, whether they're science fiction or not. I always like underwater and submarine stuff. And this for its time was kind of an interesting sort of almost got to jump on the future in a lot of ways. So it's an entertaining way to knock off like about an hour and a half.
We will revisit atomic submarines shortly, but I'm going to try and stick with chronological to my list here by not doing it next. But I do have an atomic submarine movie myself coming up here. Just a little foreshadowing.
I bet I know what it is.
You probably would be the one who would guess, actually. All right, am I up?
Yeah.
All right, I'll stick with chronological, and I'm going to go 1 year earlier than the other atomic submarine movie, The Brain That Wouldn't Die. I love this movie for its simplicity. It's just barely an hour. It's a lot of fun. This lady and her husband or boyfriend, anyway. She's coming to visit him at his lab. She gets into this horrible accident. He takes her head, and her head somehow gets severed off of her body. He wraps it up in his jacket, brings it over to his lab, and he keeps the head alive in this pan. And that's where we get the famous Jan in the Pan, which, you know, for us B-movie aficionados is just like an icon. And that scientist has disagreements with his father, who's also a scientist. He's more traditional. He doesn't like his son's kind of pseudoscience where he's going into it. And then, of course, during all the other action going on in the movie, there's this big, large wooden door, and some kind of creature is behind there that we don't get to see until the final moments of the movie. This ugly hand comes out of the door a few times, and he has to chase that back in. And he doesn't come out until the very end. It's really it's a little bleak, but it's a lot of fun. It's a good fun horror movie, and again, it's got that iconic image that nobody realizes it probably came from this really super low budget movie called The Brain That Wouldn't Die with good old Jan in the Pan.
I've written about that one. That's an all-time sleazy movie classic. This guy, the doctor that has a girlfriend's head in the Japan, he does what every guy with a loud girlfriend wishes they he puts duct tape over her mouth when she starts mouthing off to him too much. It's awfully sexist, but that's one of the best scenes in the movie. The guy saves, he saves her life, puts
He
her head
does.
in his hand, and she's ungrateful right from the minute. I put duct tape over her mouth too.
She might be a little worried about quality of life at that stage, though. She's only
Yeah,
ahead.
that's what I'm thinking.
Well, he's doing everything he can. He's hitting all the strip
Well,
clubs,
sure.
trying to find the best body to put that head on, which is where I
Yeah,
say the girl that he winds up picking, man, she is a knockout. So it's gory movie for its time.
for its time, yeah, it really was.
Almost
I think there's a cat fight in there too, now that you mention it. but the sleazy doctor does get his comeuppance in the end there. I won't give away too much, but he does get it in the end. But it's, you can't have more fun in an hour, I'm telling you. Not legally anyway.
It is a classic.
It is. Public domain, I'm sure it's available on YouTube and everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Public domain these days. But great little movie that everyone should see at least once at some point.
Yeah, my mom would love it, I'm sure.
I showed it to the family. They were entertained anyway, if nothing else.
It's a movie.
That's what I have.
Okay, so for my third movie, I'm going for one for 1964, and it's based on a book by Richard Matheson, The Last Man on Earth, which is based on I Am Legend. There are three major, I think there are actually some really cheap knockoff versions, adaptations of that book too, but there are three major ones: Last Man on Earth, The Omega Man, and then I Am Legend, which was Will Smith. I like all three of them. They're all very different. Last Man on Earth had Vincent Price, black and white. There's a plague that's happened, and Vincent Price's character's immune, and they're basically turned people into, the ones who survived became basically like vampires, and he's going around killing them. And it's a fun movie. I watched it again. Last time I watched it was when COVID lockdowns were done, because I figured this is very appropriate for the time.
I had to wait till after COVID to watch that again, but I did watch it not too long ago. I love that movie.
It's a great movie. I love all three versions of it myself. And literally, I've never read the book, and I just bought a copy to start reading it because I've always wanted to read it. But yeah, so that's my pick, Last Man on Earth.
I've read the book. My opinion is the Vincent Price movie is closest to the book, but Charlton Heston's character is closer to the character in the book than Vincent Price. And I'm a huge Vincent Price fan. So it takes a lot for me to say something like that. But I think Charlton Heston did capture that main character a little bit better than Price. But even if the Vincent Price movies, the plot and everything actually follows the book a little more closely.
I see things in all three of them. They all kind of had a piece of the puzzle. The Omega Man's probably my favorite out of the three, because the villain Matthias is one of the greatest villains to me in film history. That guy nailed that part so perfectly. Had a lot of good dialogue in it. I even liked the Will Smith one. I liked it up until the point where the zombies appear, and then there's no reason for them to be CGI. None whatsoever. It's just like people become so blinded by doing this stuff that I mean, those should have been practical monsters. There was no reason for them to be that.
You know what I just found out though about the Will Smith version? This is kind of cool. I posted in a horror book group that I had gotten the book, right? And they sent me the copy with Will Smith's picture on the cover instead of the one I had ordered, which I'm perfectly fine with it. I want to read it anyway. It's not like it was a real valuable edition I was getting. But I posted it on there, and this guy chimed in. He's like, "Yeah, I was the editor on that." He's like, "Something really interesting." He's like, "Because of the tie-in to the Will Smith movie, it was the first time that book ever went to #1 or went onto the New York Times bestseller list." He's like, "I got to call Richard Matheson and tell him he was on the New York Times bestseller list."
Wow.
Which was pretty cool. So because of that movie, it wound up going on the bestseller list, which was pretty cool.
And I have seen the Will Smith version too, and it's not bad either. All three are decent, fairly well made, and none of them are really straight from the book too far anyway.
You know, I like all three of them. I like them all three for different reasons.
Oh yeah.
I'm kind of with Mike in that the Omega Man is sort of my favorite of the bunch. And that was my favorite movie for many years. But I would have included that one, except that's 1970, so we just missed it.
Yeah. They're pretty. The other thing is that the Last Man on Earth is probably the bleakest ending of the three.
Yeah,
really, which is it's strange because you would think it would be the opposite progression, but studio executives don't want movies that end badly anymore.
Yeah, you have to have a happy ending.
Now, wasn't that made in Last Man on Earth was made in Italy or Spain?
In Italy, I believe. Yeah.
So they like that kind of ending.
That's
true.
true.
The bleaker, the better. It just falls perfectly for that. But
honestly, I think that ending is closest to the novel. It is a bleak ending, and not to give away too much, but it's a bleak ending in that novel.
Right. Yeah, I got the novel, but the problem is my eyesight's getting bad, so I need to get new glasses or find a big print of it. One of the two, so I can.
I'm to the point when I see those books with the really small print, I'm like, well, this would be the greatest thing ever written, but I can't read it. So.
Yeah, exactly. I have a box full of those kind of books. I just can't read. I'll wait till I get some new glasses and then see if that'll change. If not, I'll have to rehome them. But all right, my next one, going into Jules Verne territory, Journey to the Center of the Earth.
I love that movie.
I used to watch this when I was a kid on local channel. It was, I think it was either Channel 5 or Channel 9, and they always used to play these adventure movies on Sunday around
Fraser Thomas.
It was oh god, the guy's name was Tom, and he would have like the most knowledgeable. He would tell you everything, including backstories, behind the scenes stuff, and you learn so much from that guy. And that's the first time I saw that. I think I was around 9, and I didn't think anything of it until that remake. And then all of a sudden I said no. I know it's a book, but I know that they made one a lot earlier. And I went and tracked it down. And it's like it's got a great cast. I mean, Pat Boone,
James Mason. It's my favorite James Mason.
James Mason. Yeah, that's a good one. And it's just basically, an adventure movie, and some science fiction in it, because Jules Verne, he liked a little. His form of science fiction was more adventure based than anything. But here he's going into the center of the Earth, and it's one of those things that as a kid, you're like going, what's happening next? Because you're because all these different things that are happening, and you're like going, oh, and then when you watch it again, even though you know what's happening, you still kind of go back to the first time that you saw it, and kind of it's like a reunion of sorts. You get to see that movie again. So I was really glad when I found it on. It was on that. It's Twilight time, where they tend to go out of print, and then all of a sudden you find these copies on eBay for $100. And it's like I always hated that when they put out limited editions and then it goes for crazy amounts of money, especially if it's something that you want to watch. And you're not a collector, I'm not a collector, but I just love to watch these movies. But there's collectors out there that just snag them, and maybe they buy a couple copies. So that's probably why they go out of print.
I've seen guys go into comic book stores and buy the entire run of a first issue. I mean, that made me so mad I could hardly, talk, because the guy ain't buying. He's never going to read them.
No. And these people are never going to watch those movies. They're just doing it as an investment. And
it artificially inflates the prices for everybody else.
Yeah. So
the people who are the real thing.
Yeah. That are movie watchers.
That's what they use action figures too. Like the Godzilla action figures used to make me mad. They'd buy them all up so they could sell the other ones, till they're all gone, and then you'd have to buy them for like $100 on the internet. And I'm not doing that. I'm not buying it.
Sports cards, the same thing. In records, they did a lot of heavy metal records from the 80s. They go for just absolutely insane amounts of money.
Sure.
I'd like to get them, but not that much.
Right. Then same way. I got to put a budget.
Yeah, right.
So I'm not doing it.
That's my third one, and I read
that. One of the first novels I ever read, not the first, but pretty close, was the Jules Verne novel. And I didn't catch the movie until sometime in the early 90s. I think it was on USA Network or one of the cable channels. Right. And I really liked that one. It became a personal favorite for me as well.
Yeah, it's a fun movie,
And if you want to combine your last two choices there, Jules Verne also has A Trip to the Moon that he wrote.
Right.
If you get a copy of that book, his view, because it actually takes place in America, and the first quarter of the book is all about Americans' views on guns, and it is a riot. And things have probably not changed a whole lot, but that is a laugh riot. To get that from somebody from France, that our view was on guns in the 1800s even. It's really interesting, really eye-opening. If you get a chance, try to catch that.
I'll tell you what my favorite Jules Verne movie is, and that's Mysterious Island. And that will always be one of my favorite movies of any kind. You talk about an adventure movie, that's a perfect adventure from start to last. Got giant monsters, pirates, Captain Nemo, exploding volcanoes, civil war, hurricanes, balloon flights. I don't know. The thing is, I gotta say, it may be blasphemous to say it, but to me, the movie is so much better than Jules Verne's actual book, which did not have the giant monsters in it.
Really? Because I haven't read that novel. Okay, I've read a lot of it. Read that one, but
yeah, the studio wanted Harryhausen to do something on that movie. So, and I'm glad they did, because that's got some amazing scenes. The giant bee scene in particular is like one of his best.
Hey, Ron, do you want to jump to one of yours out of order?
Well, mine kind of will be like a twofer.
Oh, okay.
The last two. Kind of a twofer. All right, Bill, you're up.
Was it me?
I lost track.
Yeah, I thought it was Mike, actually.
It was Mike actually next.
Yeah, I think Mike is next.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Okay, my fourth movie is a pretty obscure one. It's a co-production between American and Danish filmmakers, Journey to the Seventh Planet. And this was by the same people that did Reptilicus, which don't let that scare you from seeing this movie.
It wouldn't scare me. I love both those movies.
It's kind of ahead of its time because it's space explorers dealing with an alien intelligence that can create illusions that are based on their memories. The movie Solaris is a lot like that. And of course, there's a famous episode of Star Trek that's that way. But this is like an expedition to Uranus, which is the seventh planet. And they go there and they have strange experiences where they start seeing their girlfriends aboard the spaceship. And then they go down and land and they see people that were dead, And also there's like a stop motion, like a kind of a giant one-eyed rat monster, some sort of a blob that sends out killer death rays, a giant
spider, I think. Yeah, giant spider.
Giant spider. It's kind of a mishmash. It's goofy in some ways, but it does kind of get with, these guys, they can't trust anything they see or hear. And some of them it affects a lot more deeply than others. And I thought it was pretty entertaining, kind of ahead of its time with its plot line. If they would have had an extra $1 million for special effects, my guess is it would have been considered an all-time classic. And even so, that stop motion rat monster, that's the one to see. That's the most impressive of the monsters.
Wouldn't every director like an extra $1 million for their movie?
Yeah. Well, I mean, nowadays they throw $1 million around like nothing.
Nowadays, $1 million you could buy anything, but
a commercial, a commercial costs more than this movie did.
You couldn't do the trailer for $1 million.
Yeah, exactly. John Agar is in it, and he's the star of many well-known 50s and 60s science fiction film. It's a very familiar face if you watch movies from that time.
I have a story about that one too. Back when I was a kid and the late great horror show came on, it had this movie with, they went into outer space. I thought it had something to do with Venus, but I was wrong. And there was a giant spider and it's in a cave and everything. That was a scene that I really remembered the best for some reason. I looked everywhere. I rented so many 50s and 60s outer space movies, bought as many as I could. I couldn't find this movie. It turned out to be that movie. When I finally got that movie, it's like, this is the one that I saw on the late great horror show when I was like 8 or 10 years old. So that was the one. So I do own that.
Yeah, you don't think of it as a giant spider movie.
Not really. No, the giant spider is in and out of there pretty fast, actually. But for whatever reason, I don't know why, that was the one scene that stuck in my head for all those years, and I was looking and looking and looking for it. So all these science fiction movies, and it finally turned. Everybody kept saying "First Spaceship on Venus," and I that was the first one that I got. I was like, "That's not the one. It's a good movie. I like that movie, but it's not the one that I saw as a kid that I was looking for." But anyway, that's the one that it turned out to be. It was Journey to the Seventh Planet. Good movie.
Maybe for you it was Have Rocket Will Travel with the giant spider.
That's right. Three Stooges, their first movie. All right, so my next movie, Mike is going to like this one for sure. I had to do a kaiju movie. I couldn't do 50s and 60s sci-fi without doing at least one. I could have done this whole list with kaiju movies, but I had to do at least one. So I had to go with Atragon, with the atomic submarine that actually can fly, and it finds this this planet with natives praying to gods of different things, and it meets up with Manda. It's the only other movie with Manda besides Destroy All Monsters. For you kaiju movies who love that one. I always wondered what other movie he was in, and that was it. It was Atragon. It's really a fun movie. I started trying to get all the kaiju movies I could possibly find, buying them from different sources and everything. This was actually one of the first ones that I wound up getting, one of my first hauls, and I really wound up liking this. It really became one of my favorites of any of the hauls that I made. It's just got a little bit of everything, a little bit of kaiju, a little bit of King Kong, a lot of science fiction. The submarine, that's this atomic submarine that's supposed to be this, thing that could really take over the world if it really wanted to, for use for defense, of course, because it's Japan. But it really became one of my favorites among that genre, that subgenre of kaiju. Is that the one you were getting?
Yeah, that's what I was going to figure. I got to watch it again pretty soon. I haven't seen that in probably 30 years.
Yeah, wow. It's been a little while for me, but not quite sure. Maybe 6 or 7 or something, maybe. But it's really a fun movie. Yeah, if you can catch it.
I remember it pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the lesser known kaijus, and of the lesser knowns, it really became one of my favorites when I watched it. That and Attack of the Mushroom People, but everyone, if you have a little bit of depth in your kaiju, most people know about that one. But Atragon is just as good as that one, I think. Maybe even better, in my opinion, at least. It is good.
All right, so I guess that brings us to
no, I just did mine's Gary's turn.
No, it's my turn.
Don't forget it.
So you guys know, we've done enough of these. You guys know I'm a Lovecraft fanatic, and I literally just saw this one for the first time a few weeks ago. Die Monster Die from 1965, which Color Out of Space is my all-time favorite horror movie, which we've discussed that in a previous episode. But this is another movie that was an earlier movie based on that same story from Lovecraft. I think this is actually more loosely based, and they wind up making it's already sort of science fiction anyway, but they sort of make it more science fiction, and they bring the radiation aspect into play. You've got Boris Karloff. The first half of the movie is pretty slow. It's very spooky and creepy, and they've set up a lot of mystery, but it's pretty slow. But then it really starts to take off after about the first half, and it's a pretty cool movie. I think they did a decent job of it. Again, it's very, very loosely based on the Lovecraft story, but it's cool stuff. And of course, they also set it in England because it's a British film.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that.
I do like that one. I love that opening. It is slow, but I love that opening scene of the dead trees in that forest in one of those early.
Which that's like straight out of the Lovecraft story, the Blasted Heath.
It might be just the part that's straight out of the Lovecraft story, but but it is a good one. That was part of American International Pictures. They were reviving some of the Poe movies, and they did a couple of Lovecraft as well, and that was part of it. It is a good movie.
It's a good movie, but that story it's my favorite Lovecraft story, and I think one of the very best horror stories in the English language.
It's a great story.
And it's just impossible to translate it to film. I mean, the color itself can't even be properly visualized.
Right.
A couple of things I enjoyed the movie, but a couple of things I think they lost a little when they set it to England instead of out in the sticks in New England. The Karloff's character in the story, he was supposed to be old man Whitley or whatever his name was, who was pretty much just a complete victim. Everything that happened, it was all beyond his understanding. In this one, the Karloff's character is more like somebody that tries to control and manipulate the forces.
Yeah, he's complicit. He's complicit in the movie.
Yeah, that alters it quite a bit from that's probably the biggest change they made. But there's some parts like he's got like a shack that's full of weird freaks and monsters that have been mutated. His wife has turned into probably the most pretty ghastly creature, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So I like it. I don't think the movie, even the newest version, is about as close as they're going to get.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think the new version is about as close as you're going to get. But again, literally you cannot film that movie and have it be, accurate to the text.
I've seen adaptations of a lot of stories and movies that I like, but I've never seen, with maybe one possible exception, I've never seen a movie that's been better than the book that's inspired it. That's true of almost everything I've seen. It's like, I like these recent Dune movies a lot, but when you read the book, you realize how much has been cut out or left out of them. Same thing with Lord of the Rings. It's comprehensive as it was. You just can't capture everything that's in a good book or a good story on screen.
And Lovecraft is particularly difficult to capture on screen, I think. I think a lot of people say that, and I think I agree with that assessment.
Well, I think one of the things with Lovecraft is he was very much, I've gotten in, Lovecraft guy that I am, I've gotten into debates with people as to whether this was just his lack of ability or if it was intentional. But a lot of times he would leave things undescribed. He'd say, "Oh, it's too hideous to describe." Well, I've often wondered if maybe he just couldn't figure out how to describe it in his text, and that's how he got out of it. But the thing about that is, when you leave things open like that, the human brain, when you're reading something, it's going to fill in the blanks, but it's going to fill in the blanks with something that's personally relevant. And when you translate that into film, it's never going to have the same kind of punch as when your brain is filling it in.
That's right. what made radio horror so effective. More effective than even movies or TV. Because I used to have a Facebook group that was kind of devoted to radio horror stuff. It's been inactive for a couple of years, but they said I'm trying to think of the phrase is you had to believe it to see it. Instead of see it to believe it, you had to believe it to see it. I think with Lovecraft, I think it was intentional, 100%. He had the ability to describe just about anything, even more than him.
His vocabulary was incredible. He sends me to the dictionary whenever I read it.
But he used a lot of things over and over again, non-Euclidean, and things that don't make much sense.
Well,
and I'm not saying it wasn't that he didn't have the ability. I'm just saying I really don't know. I've read them so many times, and I'm not sure. I love Lovecraft stuff, my favorite author, but I'm not sure.
I'm listening to a horror babble right now, The Lurking Fear. And that's a story where by the end of it, he describes pretty accurately the monsters
that's true.
that are in that story. Another guy is Clark Ashton Smith, and he had a vocabulary. He made like H.P. Lovecraft sound like Rocky Balboa. You know, I mean, his ability to describe things was on another level. He could do it both ways. He had some very gruesome descriptions and other things they leave to the imagination. And usually your imagination is going to be better than what you see.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, not all the time, but I'd say most of the time.
I would agree, and that's a point that I've made on this show before. Actually, is CGI. I mean, it may be good for a number of things. Science fiction is probably makes it better, but it really loses horror because it can make the monster or whatever look like whatever the director, the producer, or whoever the writer. They can make the monster look like whatever they want, but that kind of loses something with horror. Leave a little bit to the imagination. That's why the silly looking puppets were better, because they didn't give you a clear shot of the monster. Because if you saw a clear shot of the monster, you know it's a puppet. So,
Yeah.
so you know, they just
you just get a little glimpse.
That's
better because you filled in the blank frame.
That's the irony of the modern world, because the more they have the ability to show things, the less imagination people seem to have. That's what I found. I mean, there's no doubt that these, you know, it makes me sound like an old man, but these Generation Z kids, they don't comprehend things that don't look like a video game. If it doesn't look like a video game, they don't understand it. If you show a movie like Ben-Hur, you know, where a huge spectacle is done with practical effects, they won't watch it because it doesn't look like a video game. You know, it's really destroyed a lot of imagination in a lot of ways. You know, it's like the Outer Limits TV show had an unlimited imagination. They had like a caviar imagination and you know, a Skittles budget and stuff like the Zanty Misfits, if you know what I'm talking about with that. Those little creepy crawlies, they were just as good as they had to be to make people start thinking. You know, I think if they remade that now, it wouldn't be as good as the original.
I actually like the originals anyway. So I think that brings us wrong.
Oh yeah, there's another Joe.
Yeah, so I guess that's going to be my second in a row for duels. This one was one of my favorites growing up. When I first saw it, I believe it was on the Wonderful World of Disney. And Sunday night, they played this, and I was like, wow, it was just so cool. I mean, this guy that has this really cool submarine. I think, if anything, the only other submarine that I liked as much is the one from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. But this submarine, the Nautilus, was like, I think it was the best submarine I've ever seen. And of course, it has the character Captain Nemo. He sails the seven seas, and Kirk Douglas winds up on his ship. And I tried looking for this one. Also has Peter Lorre in it. I tried to get this one on Blu-ray, and I waited a little too long. It's out of print. Went to go look on eBay and Amazon. Lowest price one is $65. $65 for. I mean, I love this movie, but not that much, you know. But so I'll stick with this. Hopefully, someone will put it out because what is it? The Disney Movie Club is closing its doors forever. And so they were the source of all the Disney Blu-rays. You couldn't get them anywhere else except there. So hopefully someone will put it out. Maybe Disney will put it out, you know, if there's enough demand for it. But this one was one of my favorites, and up until recently, the past 10 years, I didn't realize that Captain Nemo was in something else. And that's where I'm going to go skip up to my number 5.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that until just recently, like maybe 5 years or so ago. But these were like totally 2 different kinds of movies. I mean, like you said, Ray Harryhausen, he did all the stop motion effects on that one. So, you know, of course, I had to get that. You know, that was just a no-brainer for me. You know, and I have not read the book, but one of these years I want to get down and get some of these classics and sit down and just read them, and just to see not so much how they differ from the movies, but just to see how they read.
That version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that's very faithful to the book.
Right.
That's extremely faithful. The Mysterious Island, not so much.
Oh yeah, because of the monsters. Yeah.
They did change the ending, though. The movie does change the ending, but I think in those days with the special effects, I don't know if they could have done that ending from the book anyway. But it is fairly faithful, yeah.
Let me ask you this, Ron. What performance as Captain Nemo did you prefer out of the 2 movies? Because I actually liked Herbert Lom as Captain Nemo quite a bit. I thought
I like them. I like them both, but then again, they're different. I mean, they're very, very different. The way James Mason approaches it, and the way Herbert Lom approaches it. Both of them. I mean, Captain Nemo really wasn't a nice guy. I mean, he hated humanity, and it showed it more. You heard of it more in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But then when he now, I guess, on Mysterious Island, not so much, but it's still, he just wasn't a nice character, you know, almost not villain, but more anti-hero type.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's right.
He's more of that.
In Mysterious Island, I would say he wound up being a martyr more than anything else. He came to an end, but he had he even convinced the military captain, the guy that he even changed his mind, which I don't think that would have happened if it would have been the James Mason Captain Nemo.
Right. Yeah, James Mason. I think James Mason's character is like, you know, you guys can all die. You know, basically, you guys can all die. I'm surviving. You know.
It's pretty evil.
Yeah, but it's like in an anti-hero way. I mean, are those the only 2 that Captain Nemo and at the book form were involved in, or did he was Captain Nemo had more adventures?
Those were the only 2 books of Jules Verne that was in.
Oh, okay.
Now there are authors that much later took the character and kind of played with them, and the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. For one.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's very much the anti-hero in that one too.
Well, not only that, but he's originally in the books, he was of Indian extraction. And they were faithful to that League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, even if they weren't faithful to the source in a ton of other ways.
Right.
But there was a movie from the early 70s, Captain Nemo in the Underwater City, where Robert Ryan played Captain Nemo. And that's more obscure. That may take a little doing to look that one up.
Yeah, I like that League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. That one, I mean,
Fun movie.
it could have
It is.
spawned some good sequels, but I guess the movie company probably saw that, basically it didn't do as great in the box office. So, but I could have pictured, numerous sequels, more adventures,
And my guess is when they first did that movie, that probably was the intention, but then it didn't do at the box office as well as they expected. So,
of course, yeah.
it-
I mean,
I-
that's the sad thing. You got to go by box office unless you're, a billionaire that really wants to make a movie and doesn't care if it makes money or not. I think that's probably what I would be under that category. I would just make a movie because, if I like the story enough, But those were my number 4 and number 5.
Well, I'll probably give my last one, and then I gotta kind of bow out, I think.
All right.
So the last one, in a lot of ways, I could have made it my first movie, but I didn't want to pick something real obvious. I kind of looked for movies that weren't obvious. This is probably the most obvious of the ones that I picked, and that was 20 Million Miles to Earth, because it's got my all-time favorite movie monster in it, which is the Yimmer, which, even as much as I'm associated with Godzilla, and as I like King Kong, the Yimmer, I think, is the greatest monster that's ever been put on the screen. He looks like an actual biological, everything about him makes sense. The way he's put together and the way he acts. And monster's a loaded term because this guy is pretty much a victim right from the word one. I mean, he gets hijacked off his planet without being asked, dumped in the ocean, stuck in a cage, stabbed in the back by a pitchfork, attacked by dogs, shot at by soldiers. I couldn't blame him for anything that he did.
Got a good point there. That's a good one. It's a really scary monster. One of the most frightening things that Harryhausen has come up with. Just he looks, like you said, he looks real, and he looks, powerful, muscular, and it's got a good look to that monster.
Yeah, it makes sense. You could tell he was organized when somebody thought about the biology of it. And the scary parts only come when he's been attacked. He's in the barn sleeping it off, but he gets stabbed in the back with a pitchfork, and that's when he gets really, really mad.
That's sort of like to a lot of those old monster movies. I mean, look, the creature from the Black Lagoon. He's just off being himself, and humans got to screw with him, and that's when trouble starts happening. Even you could almost look at Frankenstein the same way. He's sort of innocent, and the monster is sort of innocent, and he gets caught up because he's just doing what he's going to do. He's not evil,
He doesn't understand. Yeah.
King Kong is obviously the victim.
Oh, yeah.
This is the key that makes the classic movie monsters so much better than the slashers and stuff of the day. They've all got, that's him. There he is. They've all got some sympathetic edge to them, where you can. The only one I can think of that's unredeemably evil is Mr. Hyde. And even then, you feel sorry for Dr. Jekyll.
Right.
Dracula's pretty irredeemable, except if you go back to before he became a vampire.
Well, depends on how he's portrayed, kind of. Sometimes there's a sympathetic edge to Dracula. If you ever seen the Jack Palance version,
Yeah.
especially, I thought that one was Christopher Lee. You're right. He's pretty close to pure evil. I don't see much good in him, but most of the monsters you feel sorry for. I mean, the werewolf is pretty fierce, but Larry Talbot is a hopeless buck, and he never lets anybody forget it.
Yeah, it gets to be a little whiner after a while.
The Phantom of the Opera is, a victim of his looks. The guy that suffered the most is the Mummy. I can't think of anybody who's been through as much torture as he has. But these modern slashers that just pick a holiday and put on a mask and go out and cut people up, I don't really care about it one way or the other. I don't have any feeling for them.
Even Bela Lugosi is Dracula. He has that one scene where he says, to be dead, to be truly dead, that must be glorious. Like, he's stuck in what he is. He's gotta drink the blood.
Well, he'll never know what it's like to walk around in the day. He'll never see the sun again.
Right. Even he has at least a little sympathy,
Yeah, there's some to that. I just watched that the other night, by the way, for the first time in quite a while. But
and one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I gotta kind of cash myself in, fellas. I gotta get my own web up tonight, so I thought I'd stay. So thanks for asking. I enjoyed it a lot.
Good seeing you, Mike.
Yeah. Send me the link when you're done, and I'll try and hype it up through my own channels, and we'll see what it looks like there. I'm almost afraid to look, but well, have a good night then, and I'll talk to you later.
All right.
See you later, Mike.
All right, Mr. Bill, it's your turn.
I'm up. My last film is actually one of my favorites. The Green Slime. I'm back to my protoplasm. I don't know. I guess I'm thought process when I did this list, but it's really interesting. It's in the late '60s now because I like to do it chronologically. It's an American-Japanese co-production, and it has that late '60s vibe of the world is coming to an end to it. They're stuck on a space station. They go off onto I think it's a meteor that they're trying, or an asteroid, something like that, that's going to hit Earth. That's going to blow up. So they have to, attach something to blow that up so they can save the Earth. But when they come back, they have like some kind of little bit of green slime on some of the suits, and it escapes. But this green slime manages to form into these aliens with these long tentacle type things that have electricity on the end of them. If you touch the end of those, you get electrocuted and die. And then there's like this battle between this one really harsh general or upper military with a really militaristic view, and this other guy who wants to follow more science because when you shoot these aliens, once they become the full aliens, they bleed green and their blood will turn into more monsters. So the more violence, kind of begets more violence. Really reflects some of the attitudes of the time. So the other person in that's under him, militaristic, is kind of like, no, let's follow the science and just try to cut them off, and then we'll abandon the station, and maybe we'll just try to blow up the station, and maybe that'll just get rid of them before they hit Earth. So, and by the end of the movie, there's just so many of these things because everybody just kept having to shoot them that, it's almost like an end of the world feeling to it anyway. There was no way to stop it no matter what they would have done. It almost reflects again today, actually, to some degrees. But it's really one of my favorites. And the title song is just so much fun. The green slime, it's really catchy. A lot of heavy guitar in it. I actually put it on some of my playlists. That opening riff. So anyway, that's my last one.
Sounds fun.
I guess that brings us around to my final one then. And I would kind of wish Mike had been able to stay around for it. Because I think he probably would have had some good stuff to add to it. It's another one of my favorite movies from when I was a kid. And we can go back to the whole book versus the movie type thing too, which is 1968, Planet of the Apes, the original.
Oh, yeah.
Which, I mean, somebody had to do the movie. Somebody had to do it. And, I've had discussions about this before, talking about the difference between the novel and the movie. The movie is much, much different than the novel, but probably the biggest difference is the ending. I don't really want to give too much away. Well, you know what? It was from 1968. The novel was from before. If you haven't seen it and you haven't read it, I'm not going to worry about the spoiler. I don't know if you guys
it's all over the place.
Yeah, have you guys both read the novel or no?
I have not read the novel, but
Well, in the novel, for one thing, the apes are a little more advanced in the novel, but in the novel, he actually gets to his spaceship. It's not Earth. He gets back to he makes the whole trip back home, lands, and he sees the Jeep approaching, and guess what? It's apes driving it, which to me is sort of even worse because he made this whole trip back home, and it didn't matter because he's screwed there too. But visually, the ending to the movie is more, it works better on the big screen. So I can see why they changed that. But either way, it's just a heck of a movie and a heck of a story. And you know what? I love the newer Planet of the Apes movie, not the Mark Wahlberg one. That movie was incomprehensible to my point of view. But the ones after that, I love what they did with the apes. I love how they look with the CGI. But man, those costumes that they did back then when they did the first bunch of movies, those were so good. I mean, they were believable. It was a completely different kind of ape, but they were believable.
It was. Rod Serling wrote the ending for the movie, by the way.
In fact, I think he wrote the whole
story. That kind of sounds like him.
Yeah.
I liked how they did the reveal that it was Earth.
Yes.
That I liked that because I was kind of, when I first saw it years and years ago, and I think in the late 70s or something like that, and I was like, I'm kind of, are there on another planet? I mean, Planet of the Apes, you figure, okay, that they landed on something. And I liked the ending. I thought that was probably one of the more classic endings, basically shocking the hell out of you. Like, what?
Oh, yeah.
It was like, I think it's probably one of the biggest what moments, like he never left the planet. He just kind of went forward,
Well,
and I like the sequels, but I think they kind of started to explain too much, but 20th Century Fox wanted more of them,
Well, you can't blame them.
It kind of follows.
They also had a lot of merchandising.
It kind of follows a physics principle that if you're in outer space, time moves much slower, and the further out you are. I don't know the full physics of it, but it did follow there was a principle in physics that when you're in outer space, you can actually move forward in time.
Well, and actually, it's even less. It's even if you're like in an airplane at 40,000 feet, time is actually moving slower for you than it is for the people on the ground.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
The further out you want to
yeah.
slower it's moving.
I think that's one of the more amazing sci-fis that I've seen as a kid growing up. I mean, amazing.
It's probably one of the best sci-fi movies ever made, I think.
Yeah, that was why I was like, somebody has to do it. So I got
that Blu-ray box set of the all the old ones. I didn't like that much the TV series because it kind of fell into the kind of too cheesy category.
Dukes of Hazzard on
Yeah.
Yeah, it just had that 70. I mean, some of those 70s sci-fis were good, but most weren't.
I mean, as far as the 5 original movies, I like all of them.
Oh yeah,
They're in varying levels, but I think that for me, probably my 2 favorites are the first and the third. Beyond that, I mean, they're all good though. They're all worth watching. They hold up. And like I said, I really do like, other than the Mark Wahlberg movie, which I've tried to watch twice, and I still can't understand half of it. Other than that movie, I think the recent Planet of the Apes movies are completely different, but they're very, very good. They're very good. They're well done. I like what they've done. You know, the storyline's good. The science fiction of it is good. Excellent movies. So, but you know, the originals are amazing. And like I said, somebody had to do that movie.
Like I said, I was considering it. It was on one of my short lists, but ultimately I decided to. I'm glad somebody did it though, actually, because that is good.
I had 3 alternates because I thought that with my and the funny, I figured with these 5 that somebody would have grabbed one of them, and nobody grabbed any of them. So my 3 alternates will sit for a later episode.
Right. Yeah, that's good choice. Good choice. Well, we did another one. A lot of good movies. And for people out there that haven't seen any of these movies, go track them down. They're out there somewhere. Whether you can find them on YouTube, or if you're like us that like physical media, you can buy it. You know, you can probably find it on some streaming sites, but most likely not. You know, but if you do, you know, check it out first, and if you like it, go and buy it, because it'll basically show the studios that it's a viable genre that needs, you know, to be. I mean, some stuff that haven't even been put on Blu-ray or even DVD, you know, that need to be put out, you know, for more people to see, because not that many people have VHS players anymore, you know.
Can we go on facts for just a minute? I know you sort of talked about doing a whole episode about this. If we can just take a moment to get on that. It is critical for people to buy physical media, because the companies are wanting to do away with physical media. Look, we talked about it before. If the money's not there, they don't support it. The problem with everything being out there on streaming, you're relying on streaming, is that movies can disappear really easily.
Oh yeah.
And you don't want that. They also, there's a thing I was reading, a lot of the streaming services are starting to edit stuff too for content, because they don't approve of some of the content. So unless you buy the physical media and have it, you can't guarantee this stuff is going to continue to exist. It could literally disappear. And you know, so it's very important that people buy physical media, because without that, it's going to go away. And if it goes away, that's a really big part of our culture that can disappear.
Well, it seems to be it's up to people like ourselves to kind of push that. I've seen a lot of videos where people are saying, don't get rid of your DVDs, you know, because it's going to come a time when, like you said, they have some edited versions of movies, and some of them, if the movies aren't going to get them enough views, they'll be shelved forever. And if you don't have your own copy,
and I will say, I think there is a movement now where people are starting to grasp that physical media is important, and that you need.
I've seen a lot of young people on YouTube that are doing that, and I every time I see one of those videos, I like their videos because,
yeah.
you know, so that they know that there's people out there that actually give a dang, you know, about physical media.
I think that's an important point to make.
I just bought two movies. I'm still waiting on one of them. One of them was one of those vault movies that are so hard to get. So they like custom make them. One of the
Right.
Universal Horror History of Marie Roget just came in, and I'm still waiting on another movie that I just. So I do still buy, although I do sometimes talk about streaming, and I do enjoy streaming. I feel like it's a replacement for cable TV, not a replacement for owning physical media. So things that I enjoy enough. I do
And
still.
you know what? And I get it. It's more convenient to just tune on and streaming rather than getting out the disc, putting it in the player. I get that. I also get that the discs take a lot of space. I understand that, but you can't replace that. I mean, it's part of our culture that's going to die.
Overall, I agree with everything you said, actually.
What's that?
Overall, I agree with everything you said about owning physical media. It can get old. And really, if you talk to some people who've been watching movies for even longer than I have, and I've been watching quite, you know, I used to be one of the younger ones in the group talking about that, but they used to talk about some of the changes that have happened in a lot of the older movies as years went on. That there are scenes that have disappeared even now from television years, and that goes back from changing medias from film over to VHS and DVD. You know, there's different versions of a lot of these movies, and a lot of them do get altered already. So the more physical media that you own, the less altering that can happen in the future, even. So
exactly, it just shows those companies that, hey, people are buying this stuff.
Yeah, we need to show the companies there is a market for this stuff. And also, I would say I've noticed that even DVD quality is often a lot better when on the screen than what your streaming service gives you. It looks better.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you're
sometimes
watching a DVD on your Blu-ray, you know.
Oh, yeah. Because the Blu-ray will upscale DVDs to make them more closer to 4K. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just amazing that, you know, I mean, I get the convenience of it all.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because there's sometimes where I'll have the movie on my shelf, and I don't want to go out and get it. And unfortunately, I have to run a long cable from behind the TV, the headphone jack, because my Bluetooth thing doesn't work on the Blu-ray. So I do that. But then sometimes it's like I don't want to. I mean, for the pure convenience of it. But you know, I wouldn't. That's why it kind of annoyed me that I couldn't get that 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea on Blu-ray because it's out of print. And I could have got it months ago had I acted upon it, but I was like going, oh, it's going to be there. It's going to be there. Whatever you do, just don't wait. Just buy it, you know.
Yeah, I've learned that over the years too. It's like you'll see something out there, it's like $18-20 for the Blu-ray, and you're like, oh, it's all right, I'll get it, you know, in a year. And you go look in a year, and all of a sudden it's out of print, and they're going for $150. It's like, come on, why? But you know what I've noticed? Typically it winds up getting reissued. You might have to wait a few years, but it's going to get reissued. Although if physical media keeps going away, we might not see that happening anymore.
All right. Well, you know, got another good episode in, and episode 9, and next month we'll have episode 10. Now we haven't decided yet what the topic is, but you know, it'll be good. So everyone out there watching this, you know, just stay tuned next month. Be the third Friday of the month. It's going to be up sometime after 6 Central Time. Is that your Central?
Yeah,
Time?
I'm in Central.
Be up after 6 Central Time. Some, you know, on a Friday night. So you can watch it that night or any other night. Share it with your friends. You know, especially people that like movies, you know. And all right. Well, thanks again, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Since we've just done a 50s and 60s science fiction, rather than the usual goodbye, I'm going to end with live long and prosper.
Shazbot. No. Oh, wait, that's
Yeah. All right. I'll talk to you guys soon.
All right.
Thank you very much for watching this episode. And stay tuned for the next one.